8 mice were placed inside a perfect world. 4 males, 4 females, unlimited food, unlimited water, no predators, no disease, no bad weather, no rent, no taxes, no neighbor drilling into the wall at 8 a.m. Basically, mouse paradise. And 5 years later, the entire society was dead. Not because they starved, not because they were hunted, not because a mysterious mouse plague swept through the population. They died in a world where almost every physical problem had been solved. This was Universe 25, one of the most famous, disturbing, and misunderstood experiments in the history of behavioral science. And the question behind it was simple. What happens to a society when life becomes too easy, but meaningful roles disappear? In 1968, American researcher John Calhoun built a utopia for mice at the National Institute of Mental Health in Maryland. Calhoun had spent decades studying population density, social behavior, and overcrowding. He wasn't just a guy who woke up one morning and said, "You know what would be fun? Mouse civilization collapse." This was serious research. He had already run multiple experiments with rats and mice, watching how populations behaved when food, water, and safety were guaranteed. Universe 25 was meant to be the clean version, the controlled version, the paradise nobody could blame on hunger, disease, or predators. The enclosure was a square, about 101 inches on each side, roughly 8.4 feet by 8.4 feet. Along the walls, Calhoun built what he called walk-up apartments, vertical tunnels, nesting boxes, ramps, feeding stations, and water bottles. There were 256 nest boxes. Each one could hold around 15 mice. That means shelter should not have become a serious limit until about 3,840 mice. Food? Even crazier. The feeding system could theoretically support about 500 mice before becoming a real bottleneck. Water? Enough for more than 6,000 mice. So this was not a famine experiment. This was not Survivor, Rodent Edition. Nobody was getting voted off the island because the cheese ran out. On July 9th, 1968, Calhoun introduced the founders. 4 pairs of young, healthy mice, each about 48 days old. At first, almost nothing happened. For 104 days, the mice explored, adjusted, and built their little social order. Imagine 8 tiny real estate agents walking around saying, "This tunnel has potential, but the commute to the water bottle is unacceptable." Then the first litters were born. And suddenly, the population exploded. During the early growth phase, the number of mice doubled about every 55 days, from around 20 to 40 to 80 to 160 to 320, and then to 620 by day 315. That sounds healthy. Fast, but healthy. Except something important was already happening. In nature, when a mouse population grows too large, some mice leave. They migrate. They find new territory. They start again somewhere else. But in Universe 25, there was nowhere else. No forest, no field, no neighboring village. No, I'm moving to Lisbon to find myself. The walls were the end of the world. And once the best social positions were occupied, the younger mice had a problem. There was food, there was water, there was shelter, but there was no clear place for them in the social structure. This is where paradise started to rot. Young males who could not win territory began gathering in the center of the enclosure. Calhoun described withdrawn males forming inactive pools near the floor. They were alive, well-fed, and physically capable, but socially useless. They didn't defend territory. They didn't court females. They didn't build families. They barely reacted when attacked. Some were wounded repeatedly, not because they were fighting for dominance, but because the normal rules of mouse society were breaking down. In a healthy colony, aggression has structure. It has boundaries. It means something. Here, violence became random. And not all males became passive. Some went the opposite direction. They became hyperactive, aggressive, and socially chaotic. Normal courtship rituals disappeared. Males tried to invade nests, disrupt groups, and force interactions without the behavioral patterns that usually regulate mouse life. Basically, the dating market collapsed. And somehow, even mice made it weird. Then, the females began to change too. Some withdrew to higher nesting boxes and isolated themselves. Others were still trying to raise young, but motherhood became almost impossible. Territorial males were no longer effectively defending nests. Nursing females were forced to become aggressive defenders. That aggression then spilled over onto their own pups. Young mice were wounded, rejected, moved from place to place, or abandoned. Many litters disappeared before they could survive to weaning. Conception declined. Fetal losses increased. Maternal behavior, one of the most essential behaviors for species survival, began to disintegrate. This is the point Calhoun later described as the death of the social organization. The bodies were still alive, but the system that made them a functioning society was already dead. By day 560, Universe 25 reached its peak, around 2,200 mice. Remember, the habitat had enough shelter for about 3,840. Food and water were still abundant. Physically, the colony had not reached the maximum capacity of the environment, but socially, it had already hit the wall. After day 560, the population stopped growing. A few mice born up to around day 600 survived. But after that, no young survived to replace the aging adults. The last successful conception happened around day 920. After that, Universe 25 became a retirement home with excellent catering and absolutely no future. And then came the strangest group of all. Calhoun called them the beautiful ones. These mice looked healthy. Their fur was clean. Their bodies were unscarred. They were not fighting, not mating, not parenting, not competing. They spent their days eating, sleeping, and grooming themselves. On the surface, they looked like the winners of the whole system. Perfect hair, no stress marks, very wellness influencer with a discount code. But behaviorally, they were finished. They had never learned how to participate in normal mouse society. They did not court. They did not reproduce. They did not form meaningful social bonds. They had grown up inside a world where every complex social role was already occupied, broken, or meaningless. So they opted out. Not dramatically, not rebelliously. Quietly, they simply stopped being part of the species' future. By March 1972, the average survivor was already 776 days old. In mouse terms, that was elderly. Calhoun compared large numbers of mice living to 800 days with humans reaching about 80 years old. By June 22, 1972, only 122 mice remained, 22 males and 100 females. Calhoun projected that by May 23, 1973, the last surviving male would be dead. But reproductively, the colony had died long before that. This is why Calhoun wrote about two deaths. The second death was physical death, the body dying. But the first death was the death of complex behavior, courtship, parenting, territorial defense, social bonding, cooperation, hierarchy, and reproduction. In other words, the colony died socially before it died biologically. Now, this is where people usually take the experiment and run straight into dramatic conclusions. Modern society is doomed. Comfort makes us weak. Too much abundance destroys civilization. See, this is what happens when mice get free housing. But that is not exactly what Calhoun's data showed. The mice did not die because food was easy. They died because their social world became impossible to navigate. The problem was not abundance by itself. The problem was the collapse of meaningful roles. There were too many mice trying to enter a social system that could no longer absorb them. Too many young adults with no territory to claim, no function to inherit, no stable path into adulthood. The older mice could not maintain order. The mothers could not protect the young. The young could not develop normal behaviors. And the next generation grew up without the psychological tools needed to rebuild society. That is the terrifying part. Not that paradise killed them, but that paradise removed the obvious problems while leaving a hidden one untouched. What do individuals do when they are alive, safe, fed, but no longer needed? Now we have to be careful. Humans are not mice. A mouse cannot write a novel, build a company, start a YouTube channel, invent therapy, move countries, create a religion, join a gym, or spend 3 hours choosing the perfect font for a thumbnail. Humans create new roles. That was actually part of Calhoun's later thinking. He believed humans had one major escape route that mice did not: conceptual space. When physical space becomes limited, humans can expand into ideas, culture, technology, education, creativity, communities, and new forms of work. In simple terms, we can invent new reasons to matter. That does not make Universe 25 irrelevant. It makes it more interesting, because the experiment is not a prophecy. It is a warning. A society does not only need food, water, shelter, and safety. Those are essential, yes, but they are not enough. A functioning society also needs roles, purpose, belonging, responsibility, A path for the young, a way to participate, a reason to build the future instead of just existing inside the present. Universe 25 gave mice everything they needed to survive, but not enough to keep living as a society. 8 mice entered a perfect world in 1968. Within 560 days, that world reached its peak. By day 920, reproduction was effectively finished, and by 1973, the utopia had become a tomb. The mice did not choose what happened next, but humans still can. So the real question is not, are we becoming Universe 25? The real question is, are we still creating enough meaningful reasons for people to stay connected, useful, and alive inside the story? Stay connected for what comes next. Cairo brings you simple, surprising history every week, explained clearly, without the academic fog, and with just enough humor to keep the mice from judging us.